Last week, Claire talked about this new sermon series that we are doing called Circles. And you have a handout in your bulletin. Circle up, and you have a little self-assessment there that we had in there last week as well. The first question was, do you have a circle of trust? And that's 1 to 3 people whom you can share your life with and just really tell everything to. This week, we're kind of in that middle question. Are you involved in at least one small group, around 12 people, at church or in the community, with whom, as you seek to share God's love with all? So we went from this intimate group of people, this inner circle that Jesus shared with Peter, James, and John. And we talked about how all of our lives are shared with those people so closely last week. But now we're moving on to a little bit bigger group. We're moving on to 12-ish. So don't get caught up in the numbers. I'm a numbers person, and I like specific numbers. But don't get caught up in the numbers. It could be 11, it could be 10, it could be 15, it could be 20. Don't get caught up in the numbers. But it's a little bit bigger group than what we were talking about last week. And you're going to share not quite as much intimate things, I guess, with these people, but you're going to share your life with them. So, those 12 disciples that Jesus had were invested with Jesus in carrying on Jesus' message. They were very, very intentional about what they were teaching. They taught it consistently. They were doing ministry training. They were doing life together, the 12 disciples. They had these special teachings that they got from Jesus that maybe not everyone heard. And just like these 12 disciples of Jesus, we gather in these small groups too. And if you think about it, these are the small groups where we really grow. Our spiritual lives grow, and we learn how to become more like Jesus. We learn to live and love like Jesus by spending time together with these people. We learn to read the scriptures together and to pray together, just exactly what Parma was talking about in the children's message. And these early Christians were devoted to the teachings of the disciples. The commitment that they made to listen to these disciples was unbelievable. They had so much desire to grow, and they knew that if they listened to those 12 disciples and the teachings of Jesus, they would grow. They would understand what faith really was. Christy read in Acts 2 this passage that is talking about the significance of community and the significance of these fellowships of believers. They didn't just hang out together. They shared meals. They shared resources. They had this deep sense of unity. Everybody was seen. No one was left out. They supported each other. No one was outside the circle. And if you think about it today, this idea is pretty radical. All the needs were met in these circles. All the needs were met. People put their resources together so that someone wouldn't go hungry. People put their resources together so we could build a house so someone would have shelter. This is a radical idea. I wish it was more prevalent today. But we still can help each other today. We can still share a meal. We can still call our neighbor to check on them to see if they're feeling okay. We can check to see if anybody needs to just talk for a minute. We can maybe help somebody pay a bill. Or maybe somebody needs a ride to the doctor's office or the hospital. You know, when somebody gets sick in the church, the whole church doesn't usually go to see that person. Who usually goes? A small group, right? A small group of people. They go to check on this person. It's a small group that makes sure that this person is looked after, is seen, and is cared for. There was a woman whose husband had died unexpectedly. And the woman was just talking to her friend, and she said, you know, it wasn't that whole church that carried me through this. It was my small group. They were the ones that brought food to me. They were the ones that came to my house and checked on me. And they were the ones that stayed there after everything else had gone back to normal. My small group did that. Small groups can transform you if you let them. I was listening this morning to, I'm going to say Bam, because everybody that loves you calls you Bam, I believe. Okay, I was listening this morning to Bam tell his story just a little bit at a time when I was in here getting candles ready. Every time a choir member walked in, you see how many there are? He said, thank you for coming to my sister's funeral yesterday. That's a pretty impressive small group, don't you think? Wouldn't you like to be a part of a group that cares about you like that? In the early church, nobody went hungry. Nobody was left out because everyone was seen. You know, we talk about breaking bread together, and that can be two different things. It can be taking communion, but it can also be just sharing a meal, and we say breaking bread a lot. And this, to me, in the early church, shows how much worship and the community life were tied together. It was all part of the same thing. It wasn't separate. We didn't have a secular. And I wish ours was more like that too. The early church was also characterized by prayer. Now, we like to pray, and we're good at it, I think. We can always get better at it. But the early church prayed. They knew that they were dependent on God. And sometimes I think, I don't know that I'm dependent. I think that I can just do it myself, and I don't need God. And I am so wrong about that. So in the early church, dependent on God, and they knew that they needed divine guidance. They knew it. They didn't even have to think about it. Now, if you think of a campfire, I don't really go camping, so it's a little bit of a stretch for me. But there's a campfire. But you see how many logs are rolled up into that campfire? And they are all burning, and it's all warm and cozy and bright. But what if one of those logs rolls out away from that campfire? It's going to be by itself. It's going to get cold. It's going to go out. The fire is going to go out. So faith is what keeps us warm and cozy. It helps us to stay together. It helps us to support one another. And small groups are just a part of that. We have small groups all over the place today. We have book clubs, we have Bible studies, we have, we're starting confirmation today. You've heard of all of these small groups. These are the kinds of groups that are going to continue to help you grow spiritually. Our Methodist tradition has a very long history of small groups. Who's John Wesley? One of our founders, and your pastor answered that. So he was one of our founders, and if you remember back in the day, they were circuit riders, and so they went around to different churches on horseback. And it may be a month or two before they got back to a certain church. And John Wesley knew that there was no way that they would be sustained in faith just every 2 months. And so what he did was he formed bands and classes. Bands are what we kind of talked about last week, the smaller, intimate groups. But classes are the small groups that we're talking about today. This is not a new idea, guys. It's not new at all. These classes would meet with around 12 people in them. You see the model that Jesus is used here. They were men and women, they were rich or poor, and they gathered once a week. And this is the question they ask each other. How is it with your soul? They would read together, pray together. They would confess their struggles and encourage each other. You know, when I read the confess your struggles part, you know, sometimes I want to confess my struggles, but until somebody else does it first, I don't feel like I should do it. You know, isn't it nice when somebody goes first? Transformation took place in those small groups, and transformation takes place in those groups today. So, you've heard of EHS, Emotional Healthy Spirituality. We've done it several times here. One of the tables that I had early on, it might have been the first group, I can't really remember, but there are several people here that were in that group, and we were so sad when it was over. We didn't know what to do. We were like, oh, we don't get to see each other anymore. And so the group decided that they wanted to continue to meet. So we actually met for probably about 3 more months, and we did a book study, we went out to eat. But we began this group, we began this relationship with each other, and we didn't want to let it go because it was so good. Also, these groups that you're a part of don't have to be at church. I bet there's 20 ladies in here that are in a book club, right? There's a lot of people in book clubs here. I never even knew what a book club was when I lived in Missouri. But there's a lot of people in book clubs, and that's good. That's a nice group, isn't it? It's a good group to hold yourself accountable. You can also be in more than one group. You could be, I wish Zach Kloss was here because he used to play rugby and he had this great relationship with all his teammates. So you could be on a rugby team. You could do crafts and woodworking. It doesn't have to be just one, and it doesn't have to be just at church. These are people you're spending your life with. And do you see what the most important part of this whole thing is? Relationships. The whole thing. Relationships. Discipleship. If you're in a small group already, you know the power that that small group has. You know that if you're in a Sunday school class, You meet, you hold each other accountable. We have peacemakers or keepers. I can't ever remember. Peacemakers. We have the seekers. We have the library class. We have conversation corner. Those are all adult classes. And then we have all the different kids classes. Some of those classes even venture out of the church together. Isn't that crazy? They go to trivia night, and sometimes they even win. You don't have to stay here. Just because you're a church group doesn't mean you have to stay at church. You go on out there in the world. So some of you might not feel like you have that group. You come to church, and you sit in the pews, and you worship, and that's all really, really good. But faith wasn't meant to be isolated or only in rows. It was meant to be in circles or small groups. The early church grew not because of the buildings, although our building is beautiful, or the programs, but because of relationships. And this is the way that modern churches grow too. Don't answer this question. Let me ask you though, do you have a small group? If you already have one or two, give thanks. If you don't, maybe today's the day. Maybe you're feeling a nudging that you need to be part of a small group. Maybe you even kind of feel a nudge, maybe you need to start a small group. I encourage you to do one or the other. There's so many good people here. There's so many things you can learn from one another. Ask God to place these people in your life who can help you grow and who you can help grow. You want them to help you, but you want to be able to help someone also. There was a quote at the beginning of Claire's sermon last week by Parker Palmer. And I just want to read that for you. He was the author of A Hidden Wholeness. A circle of trust is a group of people who know how to sit quietly with each other and wait for the shy soul to show up. We are free to hear our own truth, touch what brings us joy, become self-critical about our faults, and take risky steps toward change, knowing that we will be accepted, listen, no matter what. So Greg has a beautiful slide. We talked about rows. Rows are linear. You can't necessarily see the person at the end of this row and the end of this row. But if you look at circles, look at circles. Circles are continuous. They don't ever end or stop. Rows like these can inspire us, but small groups of caring people transform us. So be it, and so it is. Amen.